This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen with you. We've got a great show for you today. I hope everything's been great since the last time we met each other. It is warm here in Florida today. It's 95 degrees with about 90% humidity. I'll do a Johnny Carson line. It is so hot today. When I went out earlier, I saw a tree thank a dog. So that's how hot it is. At any particular rate, that's an old joke. Randy Lane, my guest, is good. Probably laughing at that. I'm sure he is. My guest today is one of the dynamos in the broadcasting business. He is a consultant, and he's one of the top-notch people in the world. He's also good friends with a really good friend of mine, Mr. Eddie Main. Let me just tell you a little bit about Randy Lane. Randy Lane is the founder and president of the Randy Lane Company. If you want to find out more about him, he is a radio station and broadcast consultant. Go to randylane.com. Okay? Randy has also been the recipient of many awards in the industry, twice as a consultant of the year with the Worldwide Radio Summit, 4 times with the Billboard as a consultant in radio for a consultant of the year. He has also coached, which is part of what he does, people like Jimmy Kimmel, Ryan Seacrest, Dave Ryan, and Paul Castronova, who we all know from South Florida. And he is one of the dynamos of the business. He deals with many of the top broadcasting networks, as well as what he does in coaching. I'm trying to impress him today that maybe he'll take me under his wing and he'll teach me a few things at my tender age of 73. Without further ado, would you please welcome the one and only, the dynamo of the broadcast business, Mr. Randy Lane.
Hello. How are you, Gary?
Sir?
I'm
doing
good.
fine.
It's a pleasure to be here on your show.
How are things in California?
Well, I'm in Tennessee today, but California is wonderful. And the humidity is low, Gary.
You had to rub that in too, did you? All right. Okay. Absolutely.
But it's about 90% here in Tennessee today. So we're close to you.
Yeah, it's warm all over. I mean, I don't think anybody's really enjoying a spring. I think it's all summer, and that's the end of it. Before we get into the program, I want to talk to you about what was CBS thinking. I mean, it was the gold standard when I was growing up. I understand the economics of the radio business. I understand the competition aspect of the radio business. I understand everything that there can be, why a radio station would reduce, close, whatever the case may be. Why didn't they just reduce their workforce and keep CBS Radio News moving forward? As I said, growing up, it was a gold standard that we all lived by. What were they thinking? What did you think when you heard this?
I have had clients that are affected by that, and they're still scrambling to get audio, for example. I was surprised by that, and I don't think it was a good move. Not a good move for radio, and I think that it's not going to be great for CBS in the future going forward.
Yeah, I just, all those people that have been displaced, that are looking for work, and you and I know as we discuss, and this program opens up here as we move forward, radio jobs are not that easy to be had. Radio stations are cutting back, as we will discuss as we move forward. Also, too, on Friday, I found out that the talks between iHeart, which is one of your someone who you consult, and SiriusXM, the talks have stalled. Now, I don't know about you, but do you think the FCC would really allow a merger between these two giants to continue moving forward? I mean, iHeart, every 6 months, they're laying off a ton of people. SiriusXM, I have friends of mine like John Fogelsang, who is on SiriusXM. I mean, do you really think that these two dynamos will ever be allowed to merger, really?
I hope not. And I think if they do merge with CBS, if SiriusXM does, I don't think it's going to be a good thing for SiriusXM. I think that the freedom that they have, the innovation that they're able to do with formats and with personalities and everything may be a lot more restricted. And so I'm with you. I don't think the FCC is going to allow that. And secondly, I don't think it's a good thing, and I hope they don't happen.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, there's as I said, as this program unfolds, we'll discuss the employment situation, which is something you coach. You've coached some
Yeah.
of the top-notch talent in the world, and I'm trying to impress you today, but I don't think it's working so well at this particular point in time. But at any particular rate, I'm also trying to be humble as I possibly can. I mean, I went to the University of Miami, so I am humble. By the way, before I let too much time go down, I want to thank my executive producer, Tommy Said, who managed to get me on the air today. I don't know what happened, something on my end, I'm sure, as always. You began your career, as all of us have in this business, working for radio stations, number of them over your first number of years. I was very fortunate. I worked in Miami. I interned when I was at the University of Miami. Then I worked at a number of radio stations down there. Those were great years for me. I learned from guys that were in the business, pros. I learned how to get my own personality moving forward on the air because it's different than what your normal personality would be somewhat. And I was able to cut my teeth. Now, you moved around from a bunch of different cities, not only as an on-air personality, but as a PD eventually. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But were those wonderful years for you, those growing years, those cutting your teeth and learning about the business?
I loved being on the air. I started out in Memphis when I was in college and, went on from there and mainly in top 40 radio. I was a top 40 DJ and then later became a top 40 programmer, but I loved the magic of being on the air, the creative process of that. It was just a fun time. And if you look back in the 70s and 80s, it was a lot more free form, a lot less restrictive than it is today, not nearly as corporate too. There were still a lot of independent stations, a lot of mom and pops, even in big markets like Miami.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No. The mom and pops and the competition that was going on, and it wasn't like a hated hatred competition. It's just, hey, I just heard this over on this station. Let's up them one. Oh, I just heard this. Let's up them one. Let's use our creativity. There's no more of that anymore with voice tracking and everything else going on. It's like, I just throw it on there, get the commercials going, blah, 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 blah. There, and we're going to talk about personality radio too as we unfold this particular program. When you moved from behind the microphone, which, by the way, being in radio and television was not my goal. I'll just set that up front. Everybody knows the story that watches this program. I wanted to be an airline pilot like my father. But when I got out of the Air Force, my vision wasn't too great, and neither were my math skills. So that sort of ended that right away. So, I had to go find something else. And I walked one day into the college radio station at George Washington University, where I was going when I was still in the Air Force. And then when I got out of the Air Force, I went to the University of Miami, which I consider my wonderful golden years in college. Randy, I love that school. I love the University of Miami with all my heart and soul. I truly, truly do. We got gypped by Indiana, but we'll get there. But at any particular rate, I loved it because I got to learn. And when I was at the University of Miami, I interned for Larry King. I learned from him. I learned from the producers of the show, and then eventually WIOD hired me. And I worked for them for a while. Then I went on to do some music radio. It was Zeta 4. We were rock and roll, hard rock, and top 40 stuff too with another station, WINZ. But I loved it because I interned at WINZ too first. And just taking that little razor and cutting the reel-to-reel tape off.
Yeah.
And cutting my fingers up. Every one of us have little finger cuts from this day. I see a razor and I run. But those were great, wonderful years. You also worked as a program director in a number of the cities in which I have lived, like Pittsburgh and Chicago. And of course, LA. I lived in LA for a number of years, and that's another story altogether. When you were on the air, but then you became a PD, did you find yourself wanting to do what I would do if I was moving? You could work in Pittsburgh, and then you could get a job in Philadelphia. Same state, different cultures, different people, different types of people. Did you let your on-air people know when you were a PD, or did you do it yourself when you were on air? Immerse yourself into the culture of the city, besides what the radio station would have set up for you to be introduced into the community. Did you go out there and go to restaurants and meet people, just marketing yourself and branding yourself?
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting that you're talking about really getting into the local culture and everything. I've seen this for the last 5 or 6 years in a lot of research studies that local has become more and more important every year. You know, and I think part of that is the technology and the fact that we don't have the human touch. You know, you call a business, you go into a voicemail, and I think that has become so important, and radio stations are starting to realize that again and capitalize on that and the importance of local. Now, the entertainment value still has to be there. You can't be local just to be local, but as long as it's relevant and things that people care about, that's a great way to make a connection. You know, when you're talking about those fun times in radio in decades past, one of the things that we're missing today in radio is taking a risk. Back in those days, the radio shows, radio stations were always getting themselves in the news because they were part of the culture. They were part of the city, and they are always doing fun and innovative things that got the attention of other media as well.
Yeah, I miss those times of competition.
Yeah.
Before Larry King died, I would see him in Los Angeles a lot, and I know you lived in LA, I believe, for a number of years. And
30.
so 30 years, and I would see him.
All like that.
I would see him on Fairfax. I'd see
Mm-hmm.
him there. He'd come to the Improv if I was performing or if somebody else was performing, and you'd see him around town. And he turned to me one night and he grabbed me and he said, "Why aren't you in radio? That's where you belong. Not on stage being a comic. You're not a comedic actor. You're funny. You're a nice guy and you're a good actor. But why aren't you in radio?" I said, "Larry, I have made the rounds in this town for 2 years. I made the round. I even invited them to the Groundlings, where I was a member for a while, to see me perform and see how well I am adapting to things, thinking on my feet. And nobody wants to talk to me." Because at the time, by then I was 34, 35 years old. And they're all telling me the same thing. I'm looking for the younger kid coming out of college. I'm looking for the younger kid. And then also, too, I didn't realize what was going on with the corporations coming in and buying out the mom and pops. And suddenly the salaries went south and the benefits went south and all that other stuff. And that's that. But I loved those beginning years. Larry taught me so much. Can I tell you a quick story? A real quick story?
And I want to tell you something about Larry King, too, because I want to hear your story. And I have something I want to say.
At 5:58 in the morning, Larry would have to introduce the fact that the news was coming up with Mike Ranieri, God rest his soul, and that from the University of Florida came the local agricultural report. Every morning we'd give it. And he was tired one morning and he said, "I'm so tired of this long speech and everything else." I said, "Well, after you get through introducing that Ranieri's coming on after the news, why don't you just say, 'And now here from the University of Florida is up your plants.'" And I didn't think he would actually use it, but he did. 3 hours later, I get a phone call. I'm at home. Who gave Larry that idea? I said, "What do you mean, what idea? Up your plants?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, that's what Larry says. He doesn't know either, but he came up with it." So Larry protected me. Otherwise, I probably could have got fired. What's your Larry King story?
You know what? It's not a story. Excuse me. I just want to say Larry King was such a great interviewer for two reasons. One is that he was a very active listener. I mean, a lot of times he didn't prepare that much because he wanted to be curious and ask questions that the audience would be asking. And as a result of that, he asked great questions. And then when somebody made a comment, he wasn't thinking about his next question. He would play off of that comment and continue to deepen and expand the conversation.
Exactly.
Pardon me. Yeah.
And I learned that from him. I have notes in front of me about you, and I have notes of questions I want to ask you, but I'm not cemented to them. So if you brought up something about working with Paul Castronova, coaching him, or Jimmy Kimmel, which you hopefully will at some point here as we move forward, excuse me, I'll go to whatever sounds interesting, whatever makes the show flow, and whatever keeps people going. That's where I'm at. And my questions are, forget it, but I learned that from him. But he was a great one for that. Now, a lot of times though, he would get caught in the middle of an interview at 3:00 in the morning, because we were on from midnight till 6 in the morning. Sometimes at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, he'd be like, he's already tired. He's had enough. And, as he got a little bit older before he went to work for Westinghouse up in Washington, D.C. But I learned a lot from him, and what a nice gentleman he was to me. And speaking of things, what is the current state of radio? We've been hearing for decades that AM is dead and buried. Yet there are pockets around the country where AM is absolutely necessary for a number of reasons, and people still like to listen to their morning programs on AM, but is because of Sirius and other social media platforms like podcasting and etc. Is AM dead, and is FM not far behind?
Well, AM is not dead. It certainly has declined in terms of use over the years. But there are, as you mentioned, there's still a few markets where it does, even in Los Angeles, which, obviously it's a very progressive market. KFI, AM still does very well there in San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and other markets. And the other thing, as this has come up in Congress about taking AM out of the new cars, is that when there is a natural disaster, I had a client in Asheville, North Carolina, in the last hurricane that happened. What was the name of the hurricane last year? I think it missed you guys.
Oh, yeah. We were lucky. We didn't get anything last year.
But they got the remnants of that, and there was flooding, and power was out for thousands of people. AM radio came to the rescue, and FM to a degree on the FM stations that stayed on. And so that's the thing. If there's a natural disaster, AM radio sometimes is the only form of communication. If all electricity is out, everything is down. And so I think it still has a place. And it's still in talk radio, it pulls substantial ratings in a few markets around the country.
Yeah. I have always wanted to get back on terrestrial radio to do a talk show. But I guess at this particular point, it's I don't know. Who knows? Maybe Randy Lane will do something about that. Who knows?
Maybe I will.
Maybe you will after the beginning of this show. Who knows? By the way, you notice I do have a good sense of humor. I mean, when you grow up and your uncle is Tubby Boots, a great comedian on Miami Beach, it's kind of hard not to. Speaking of radio, AM, FM, etc., and of course, voice tracking has a lot to do with what's going on with a lot of the jobs that have been lost. And I don't like voice tracking. I know some friends of mine who do it. They need the money, but they don't like doing it either because they know what they're doing. They know I'm hurting somebody else on the other end. I'm doing a good job on my end. I'm paying my bills, but I'm hurting somebody else on the other end. Is personality radio slowly but surely, due to corporate demands, disappearing altogether?
I can tell you this, it better not, because talent, personality is the future of radio. And the reason for that is that you can duplicate a playlist so easily, and you can get music at your fingertips on your phone. As far as music radio goes, there's nothing to set you apart. But what sets radio stations apart today are the personalities. Fred Jacobs of Jacobs Media, they do what they call a tech survey, and they talk to about 30,000 people around the country every year. So it's a great sample size. And the number one reason that people are tuning into radio today is for the personalities. Music is still up there, but it's behind, and it's been that way for the last 5 or 6 years. And that bar of we're listening for the personalities keeps going up every year.
Yeah.
Now I will tell you this, Gary, the state of radio financially is not in good shape today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not dying, but because of all of the other competition, and a lot of this, we have the online competition and everything, but a lot of this goes back to deregulation when it became corporate radio and the prices of radio stations are going sky high, starting in the mid 90s into to about the time that the recession hit around 2008 and 2009, the prices were going up. They were, companies were paying way too much, so they were inflated values. And then suddenly, recession comes along. They're not increasing revenues. They find themselves upside down, and they've been struggling since then. And so what's happening is, as you mentioned earlier, they're cutting jobs, they cut promotions, they cut marketing, but cutting people and benefits is the biggest thing. And there are so many radio stations that are running just on a shoestring budget. With sometimes there's a lot of markets that iHeart and even Cumulus and some of these bigger companies will be one or two people with 6 or 7 radio stations that's on there live. And so that is what is hurting the industry. And it's at a critical time too, when we have all of this other competition from podcasting to streaming music services and all of this. And it's a tough situation.
It is, and like we've talked about. You talked about too, Randy, very much. By the way, Randy Lane is joining us here. He's a top consultant in the media business. He has coached such people as Jimmy Kimmel and Ryan Seacrest and many other famous broadcasters. And he's kind enough to join us here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you. And as I said, Mr. Randy Lane is our guest from the Randy Lane Company. You can catch more information about him and his company if you're interested in getting into the business at randylane.com. So what I miss, as you said earlier, is the mom and pops, the competition, the idea that we're having some fun. I hate to say this. I don't like political radio. I really don't. It drives me up a wall. It makes my blood boil. And I worked in the political arena in Washington, D.C. when I was in the Air Force, in a sense. I've also worked for the Attorney General of the state of Illinois, and I've been on some political campaigns in the past. But I got to be honest with you, politics annoys me, particularly now, and I'm not going to get into anything or naming any names, but it's annoying. Both sides are annoying. And the political pundits that are on there half the time really don't even know what they're talking about. They mispronounce what they're doing, the names, the cities, etc. And it just is annoying. Now, sports is a little different. I love sports. As long as my Hurricanes are on, I'm watching that TV.
They're good. They're good
yeah.
in football and basketball a lot of times. Yeah.
And in baseball, we're not bad either. I think.
Yeah.
I think we're in there too a little bit. But it is what it is. And here's the next kind of question, because it evolves here. AI, how much has it and how much will it hurt the industry that I love and that you obviously are a dynamo in?
Well, it will hurt to a degree. And I was asked this question. I've been asked this question a lot of times. Well, hey, are we even going to have, in 10 years from now, are we going to have live personalities? It's all going to be AI. I don't believe it will be. And I'll tell you why. There's a guy named John Naisbitt that wrote a book in the 80s called Megatrends. And one of the 10 trends that he predicted that were coming in the next few decades was a thing he called high tech, high touch. And he said as the technology expands and increases in people's lives, there will be a need for more emotion, more high touch. And we're seeing that already. There's a trend right now among Gen Z people of getting off of social media. In fact, social media peaked in 2022 and has been declining. It's still, I'm not saying it because it's still very big, but it's a very big trend right now for young people to get off, to go to buy vinyl records and even getting away from smartphones and going back to flip phones and things like that. Yeah. And instead of online dating, a lot of younger people are like, let's have a cup of coffee. Let's get together in person. And so I think what you're going to see is that AI is a valuable tool, for example, in helping to plan a show. And it will help your creative process. It's not going to take the place of, but it does help in giving you ideas. And if you have a background type radio station, for example, there's a lot of mainstream ACs that don't want to have any personality, and with station IDs and things like that, or just doing quick intros where it's strictly a music station. You don't want to have personality. Then I think that that's a viable option to use AI to your advantage. So if you use it as a tool to help planning, to help in the creative process, but not take the place of, I think it has a place. But I don't think it's got to replace live personality.
You mentioned something while you were talking. A lot of young people out there don't know this, but yes, before there was CDs and there was 8-tracks and there was vinyl records. Yes,
Yeah.
plastic little things that went around, a nice little thing, and you played them, and that's where we all grew up learning how to deal with it. As a matter of fact, I think my very first was a 45, Frank Sinatra,
Yeah.
"Fly Me to the Moon," when I was living in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, of all places to be. For
I've been
God's
there.
sake. I'm telling you. Well, I grew up there in the '60s, and what a wonderful. That's what I loved about radio back then. In when I was working in radio at WIOD back in the '70s and stuff, it was like living in Wilkes-Barre to me. It was like you were sheltered. You were taken care of by these senior people. You were taught how to do this, how to do that, and maybe that's what Gen Z is tapping into. Maybe they're finally saying, let's get back to where we're talking to each other. Because you remember the old saying in politics, it's all local?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yes, I do. I do remember that.
When I met Bill Clinton many, many years ago, and I almost went to work for him, and that's another story for another day. He'll take your hand and shake your hand, and he'll put both hands on your hand, and he makes you feel like you are the most important person at that moment in the world. Nothing else matters. That's what we need to get back to. Not looking over your shoulder and going, "Oh, hey, Meg, I'll be right over." It's like, no, Randy Lane is the most important person to me right now. I'm looking at you in your fabulous palace there in Tennessee, and you're important to me right now. Tommy, my engineer, Tommy Sitt, is important to me right now. And that's all that matters. And I think we need to get back to that in every walk of our life, that the human interaction, which is what cell phones and other things have taken away from us, we need to get back to that interaction, not sitting at a table and texting each other. Talk, have a conversation, understand each other, learn from each other, grow as human beings. That's my take on it, and I'm sorry if I got on my soapbox, but there I am.
No, but let me tell you how that relates to radio and what is happening today. The most successful personalities have two things. The number one thing is authenticity, being real, sharing their personal life experiences, sharing their stories, and the number two is humor. I tell you, if you have authenticity and humor, it's a home run. It's gold. It really is. And that's what people are attracted to. They want to feel good. And back to like these political talk shows, they're so divisive that, and the country is so divided and so polarized. People are getting sick of that. They're sick of all of the fighting. They want to escape. They want to feel good, and they want something real. And I think that's why you're seeing this reaction from the younger end of the audience today, too.
Yeah. I hope so. I sincerely hope so. You have worked in a lot of major cities, as I said before. Memphis, you worked in Pittsburgh, Chicago, Los Angeles. I'm trying to think of some of the
Washington, D.C.
Oh, yes, where I was based in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite, and why?
Well, I have to say that I love Los Angeles. I know that Los Angeles and California has taken a lot of heat the last few years. And I think sometimes when you get to be a state that has the economy that's a number 5 in the world or number 4 or whatever it is, people like to pick on you. And there have been a lot of problems. There have been a lot of problems in California and Los Angeles. But you know what? My wife and I are both nature people. We love the mountains. We love the desert. We love the ocean. We love all of that. And we love what's probably the best climate on the planet in Southern California. We do. And the other thing too is that California is a very progressive place. It's a very innovative, a very creative place to be.
Yeah.
And it's one of those places that there's not a lot of judgment. You can pretty much be who you are.
You know, if I could afford it, I wouldn't mind moving back there, but I can't afford it. I mean, the apartment that I lived off of on North Kings Road, I think my wife and I paid $850 a month for it back in the '80s. Now I think it's going for like $3,500 a month. I mean, it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's outrageous. And the great part is I
Well,
could just walk to the Improv where I performed, or I could take my car and go down to the Groundlings where I studied, I studied, and I was a member for a while. You know.
and you're right. That's the biggest issue is the cost of living. But you know what? I have clients in West Palm Beach, WRMF, uh, and they say the same thing that the cost of living is
Oh yeah.
skyrocketing in that area.
Oh yes, it
Both
is.
both in rents and housing costs are like rivaling California and Manhattan.
Down in Miami, down where I grew up, there is in the downtown area, which used to be this one area, used to be huge parking lots. Now there's all these high rises. A one bedroom, first floor, $5,000 a month,
Woo! Wow!
and they're full, and they have a waiting list. Now I don't know about
Amazing.
you, but I can think of a lot better things to do with $5,000 than pay my rent with it. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, just
exactly.
because
Me too.
me, um,
Well,
have you?
I had a great experience at Star 98.7 in Los Angeles. That was
Yeah.
my last program director job. And one of the people that I met at that time, there was a young man who had moved to Los Angeles from Atlanta. His name was Ryan Seacrest,
Yes.
and he was 20 years old. He had, in fact, just had turned 20, and he got a syndicated television show called Junior Gladiators. Now, it ended up only lasting about 13 weeks, but he was doing some radio in Atlanta, and he wanted to work part time. So he came in he brought his demo and everything. And I said, well, Ryan okay, you've been doing some radio in Atlanta. Now you've got the syndicated TV thing. Are you more interested in doing radio or television? Which one do you want to pursue? He took a deep breath and he said, I want to be a star in radio and I want to be a star in television. My goal is to be the next Dick Clark. And
Yes.
I said, he's 20 years old, and I'm like, well, good for you, Ryan. That's great. And who
Yeah.
knew, like 10 years later, he pretty much would accomplish that.
I understand from people that I know that know him. Of course, I've asked him to come on the show, but he's too busy being a star. But at any particular rate,
In
um,
television and radio.
he
Yeah.
he has a natural instinct for this business, whether it be radio or television, that whatever coaching you had to do for him, which I'm sure was some, probably wasn't as much as you had to do for some other people. He and Kimmel have a broadcasters who come to this and already have an instinct about it. You don't have to coach them very much. You have to coach them a little. They'll listen to you. That's the other important thing, learning, which I should have brought up at the beginning of the program, but I didn't, is when you begin in this business, you have to listen. You have to learn. You have to understand. And I understand Seacrest knows exactly which way to turn on camera, which way not to turn on camera, what to say here, what to say there. Everybody who's ever known him says he's there. Whatever it is, he's Mozart of the broadcast business.
Yeah, I did hire Ryan, and he did overnights, weekends, which is now all voice track today.
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
did that live. This was in 1995, and a couple of years later, after I started my business, I was hired back by the station to coach his afternoon show. He was on with a young woman named Lisa Fox. And they wanted to take advantage of all of the traffic, as you know, in Southern California, that's available for about 5 hours in the afternoon. Well, that guy was a workhorse. He would come into the radio station at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, work on that show for hours before going on the air. He would get off the air sometimes, give me a call and say, hey, what do you think about this? If I do this on the show tomorrow. So he was really, I mean, he was a driven individual. So
Well,
a lot of what he accomplished is hard work. And he was,
yes.
not the most innovative personality in the world, but there are some people that have that so-called X factor. There's just something, there's some charisma there that's very difficult to define that he had. Now,
Yeah.
Jimmy Kimmel was another story. I have to tell you how that Jimmy and I met. Right before I went to Los Angeles, I was working for another consulting company, Valley Riches Consulting, a guy named Dan Valley in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And I got a call from a general manager in Tucson. And the call kind of went like this. The GM calls him in and goes, hey, we got this new morning show. It's called Mike and Jimmy. A guy named Jimmy Kimmel and Mike Elliott. At that time, this was 1993, nobody knew who he was, including
Yeah.
myself. And he said, we're getting a lot of complaints on Kimmel. And we'd like to know if you would come out and do a workshop with these guys, spend a couple of days with them, and tell us if we should just cut our losses, fire this show, and get another show, or should we try to manage these complaints and work with them? And I said, okay. So I'm off to the desert. I go to Tucson. I spend a couple of days, and at the end of the 2 days, I realized, I said, man, this Jimmy Kimmel guy, he's a funny guy. I think he's going to be great here in Tucson.
Yeah.
And so I go into the meeting, and the general manager and the program director are there, and they said, okay, well, what's your decision? Do you think we should cut the show, or should we try to work with him? I said, I would keep the show. I believe that Jimmy Kimmel was going to be a star here in Tucson. Mike Elliott is a good host. He's a good driver. We can manage the complaints.
What were the
Dead
complaints?
silence.
What were the complaints?
People were just would complain about some of the edgy humor that he would do and that sort of thing. So that's my recommendation. Dead silence in the room.
Hmm.
They fired Jimmy, and then they fired me.
Oh my God. Well, there is an old saying, Randy, and you know this from the beginning of the program. I didn't bring it up, but if you don't get fired the first couple of years you're in broadcasting, there's something absolutely wrong with you. I mean,
That's exactly right.
WIOD, the WIOD fired me once, then brought me back because they said we can't find anybody to work with Larry like you do, and then then he hired me, and then other stuff like that. Now I got the internship, by the way, because of my Uncle Tubby, because he and Tubby were gamblers and stuff like that. So that's how I got that. But Jimmy Kimmel is great. I met him once when I was performing in Vegas. I was an opening act for a number of people in Las Vegas, and I used to travel around with them too. And but I met Jimmy, nicest guy in the world. To give you the shirt off his back. I mean, you can see that with his shirt. And for certain people to go after him, to have him cancel off the air is such. Well, I don't want to say it on the air because I try to be a polite gentleman as much as I can. I want to change course here a little bit if I can,
Okay.
and talk a little bit about your company. And I know that we're going to get further into your company as we move along. But you do something that I was acquainted with when I was at the Groundlings, and that is you also coach business executives, entrepreneurs,
Hmm.
and sports personalities at the Randy Lane Company. And by the way, for some of the sports personalities that I knew, and the reason I say that, Randy, is my older brother Michael, my half brother, was a member of the Baltimore Colts for 14 years. So I was surrounded by, he, God rest his soul, he's gone now, but I got to meet a lot of people in the 60s and 70s and 80s that knew him and loved him with all their heart. But anyway, my brother Michael, some of the sports personalities I've met over the years, they needed an injection of a personality to begin with before they can think about doing anything on television. But the first time I became acquainted with business executives was at the Groundlings, where they were teaching classes about how they deal with making a speech, how to talk in front of a large group of people, how to make their sales better, how to think on their feet quicker, which is what the Groundlings is all about anyway, to help you as an actor to think on your feet a lot quicker, and help move things along. What do you guys do there for business executives and entrepreneurs that maybe is a little different than what other people do?
one of the first things that we do with entrepreneurs, business executives, and sports personalities is to help them to define their character. Like, what are your endearing characteristics? What are the things that make you likable as a person? What are your quirks and flaws that you can be self-deprecating and joke about yourself, and just how to bring out your personality? And one of the other things that we talk to those type of people on are storytelling, how to tell a story. Because if you're in business, I don't care what you do, it telling your story and the stories of the people that you have helped is instrumental in the success of what you do. And then also defining your brand, defining your personality brand and defining your business brand. So it's essentially a branding and a character development process that we work with people who are non-media personalities.
Right.
Hmm.
We have Randy Lane on with us here on Main Street. He's the founder and president of Randy Lane Company. They are a consultant organization with the media organization. And so if you are interested in getting into broadcasting, or you're an executive watching this program and you want to find out how you can better make your sales and your corporate status, call Randy. They can help you get where you need to be. And so thank you very much, Randy, for joining us here. And Gary Allen with
Thank
you here
you.
on Main Street. You know, one of the things you were talking about, when I was in school, high school, college, etc., the teachers that always told a story along with the lesson, I learned from quicker than somebody just dry ABC pablum. I learned more. Stories are fascinating. People love stories. They learn from it. They seem to remember that better than they do anything else.
You know that we as human beings are wired for storytelling since the beginning of time. That
Yeah.
people sat around campfires in caves, told stories, and to this day, storytelling is one of the greatest skills that you can have as a media personality, as an entrepreneur, a business person. No matter what you do, if you can tell your stories, that is going to connect with people. Stories will hold the attention of people. It's interesting. There's a process that scientists have found out on the scientific side of this. It's called neural coupling, and that is if someone is telling a story that especially if it's an engaging story, your brain links of the storyteller and the person listening and the listeners are on the same wavelength, and you're locked in on the same wave. And that's one of the reasons why storytelling is, it works with little kids, but it works with adults too.
Oh,
If
yeah.
it's all, we'll go back to the talk shows and sports radio too. When those personalities get too far into information, statistics, and things like that, people zone out. But you can have a strong point of view. If you make that point of view, then back it up, illustrate it with a story, an example of why that you have that viewpoint, then it's going to stick with people. And so you're right that people forget information, and especially when it comes to statistics and numbers, but they remember stories.
Oh, absolutely. I also forgot to say, if you want to find out a little bit more about Randy Lane and his company, go to randylane.com, the website. You can find out all the information and how to contact them, to find out about coaching and broadcasting, as well as a business executive, whatever you really want to do. It's amazing. There are a lot of sports personalities, but when they get into broadcasting, they stumble and fall because it doesn't necessarily translate into what the American people really want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, because I tried doing baseball, and if you don't have the Bob Costas dictionary or library in your brain, you're not going to do so well. Although John Shambi's a friend of mine, and he's got one of those too, where he just reads everything that's in front of him, and that's what keeps you propelled forward. But it's kind of tough. I mean, business executives, how many times have I used to work for some people called the Game Show Network, and inevitably there would be a PR person or a vice president that wanted to host the game show. Now, one of us would always show up on set with a suit in our suitcase, because we knew inevitably During rehearsal, everything was fine because the audience was empty. There was nobody there. But when it came time for the night and suddenly the lights are on, the audience is filling in, you would suddenly see the sweat coming down off their brow. Whether it be a male or a female, there'd be sweat coming. And one of us would immediately go up to our room, put on our suit, and boom, we'd host the show. Because it's not easy standing in front of 100 people, 10 people, 1,000 people, and do what you need to do. I think the biggest audience I ever worked was at the Mandalay Bay, 10,000 people. That's the biggest audience I ever did stand up in front of. Yeah. And luckily some of them laughed, some of them didn't. I got paid and I went home. It was, it was one of those things, but they had me back many, many, many times. What is the mission of the Randy Lane Company?
The mission of the Randy Lane Company is in coaching, whether you're a media personality, sports entrepreneur, a business executive, is to bring out your creativity, to bring out your creative expression. And we do that in a way that we're not dictators, that we do that through a questioning process. I learned a lot from afar from a guy named Timothy Galloway. And he wrote a landmark book in the 1970s called The Inner Game of Tennis. And he also wrote one called The Inner Game of Golf. And it was his contention, and I agree with this too, and it's been very helpful for me in coaching media personalities. People don't like to be told what to do. But if you're asking the right questions and you collaborate with whomever that you're coaching, and then that person has ownership of their growth. For example, when he would be coaching a professional tennis player, he wouldn't say, Gary, you got to keep your eye on the ball when the ball goes across the net. He would say, let me ask you this. When the ball went across the net that time, which way was the ball spinning? So you might say, well, you know what? Let me watch it more closely and I'll tell you. So it was that kind of approach rather than saying, do this, do that, don't do that. And that doesn't work with a lot of people, but if they feel like that they have ownership of their growth and this is a collaborative process, and then I look at myself more as a facilitator than I do as a coach, really.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that when I have been coached, or, I wasn't much of a football player compared to my brother. I played baseball and I love to play it. But yeah, when I played first base and I also sat on the bench a lot. I was a chubby little kid. And, but when the coach would say to me, all right, what were you trying to do there? What were you trying to do? If you move this way a little bit quicker, you'll be able to get to the ball a lot quicker. Instead of saying, hey, what were you yelling and screaming like some coaches do? Jimmy Johnson's success as a college and an NFL coach was the fact that he had a degree in psychology and he understood how to talk to people. He understood these are young men. You don't talk to them like they're children. They're grown men in some respects. Some of these guys are already grown and they're very mature and they can handle things. But yeah, if you come at somebody with gentleness and kindness and teach and get the same point across, but in a nice way, hey, what are you thinking there? What were you thinking? What's going on there? I think you get a lot more accomplished. And if that's your coaching style, then that's absolutely fantastic for what you folks do. And I know you have a great staff. I saw the picture of them. And I know you have a great staff on board. So, I know you're highly successful in everything, which brings up the next part of what I want to do. We got about 5 or 6 minutes left here.
Okay.
The program. We're talking to Randy Lane from the Randy Lane Company. He is a media consultant and he's a giant in the business and really a nice man. And I hope I've made a new friend. I hope. And so we'll see. You have dealt with some of the top major broadcasting companies in this country. Mm-hmm. And I know broadcast companies, like any other business, the airlines or whatever, they're not thinking about tomorrow. They're thinking about 5 years tomorrow, 10 years tomorrow. What are you hearing from them about which way they think the industry is going? What won't be around anymore? What technology is on the brink of coming forward? Or do you think maybe they might revert back a little bit, like we talked earlier about how personality radio is maybe what the Gen Z generation wants, and maybe others want that too? Are they aware of that?
They are becoming aware of that, and the leading broadcasting companies are well aware of that. I mentioned the station in West Palm Beach, WRMF, is owned by Hubbard Broadcasting. It's a mid-sized company that's based in Minneapolis, but it's a very forward-thinking company, and they put a lot of emphasis on developing personalities. For example, in just about all of their markets, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and I think they have Phoenix and Seattle, markets like that. They have personality benchmarks in morning and afternoon drive because they know that what's interesting is that the audience is actually larger in afternoon drive in most markets than it is in the
Yeah.
morning now. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that started during COVID, during the pandemic, that lifestyle changes happened. But I believe the forward-thinking companies are investing more in talent. And now there's a lot of syndication going on, both within companies and syndication nationally.
Yeah.
And some of that is happening because they're wanting to save money and they're wanting to cut jobs, which is not a good thing. But I think they're finally realizing, though, that it's the people that at least the forward-thinking companies are. And I'll go back to what happened back in 2008 and 9 during that recession. And a lot of these big companies, iHeart, even Cumulus and Odyssey, just have not recovered from that, and they have so much debt that they're still trying to pay this debt down. And then now the revenues had gone down because of the competition, and so that's what's really put a hamstring on a lot of these companies today. So, but
Yeah.
I do think that, technology is still going to be important, but if they're smart, technology is going to be a tool and is not going to be the content.
Hmm.
Like it's
Well,
not going to be AI and we're not going to do everything with technology, but it is a tool if you use it in the correct.
yeah. Hopefully, I mean, there's
Yeah, I hope.
I mean, with every new technology, there are people who don't use it in the right way, and they use it for all the wrong reasons and all the wrong ways, and it causes the interruptions and like the internet. I mean, you see so much crap on the internet, you don't know what to believe, and so I even when my sister sends me something, I don't know whether to believe her or not. No, I'm only kidding. Uh,
Yeah.
and when my brother sends me something, I don't know whether to believe him, but he's a priest. I better believe him, because
Yeah.
he better believe him.
Well, here's the thing is that
Yeah.
with media personalities today, there are multiple platforms that you have to be present on. And now if you're on radio, you still have to make that your number one priority and do as
Yeah.
much as you can with the staff and the help that you have available to you to
Yeah.
develop as much of a digital footprint as possible. The good thing about social media and digital for radio personalities, for example, is that it can extend your reach and it can create new fans for you. And so I think you're going to see more multi-platform personalities in the future. And I think radio is still going to be part of that mix. If you have talent and if you have great content, the platform I don't think is going to matter.
Well, I hope so. I know that my wish is that what I grew up with and what you were dealing with when you were getting started would come back to a certain extent. I wish you had been around as a program director when I was making the rounds in LA trying to find a job on radio, whether it be talk or music or whatever, because boy, I got the door slammed in my face so often. I thought for a while I was going to be a pug nose there for a
Yeah.
while, but it is what it is, and everything. One final word from you. You look at the future, you see what's going on. As I said, you deal with major corporations. Do you see a lot of mergers going on? I mean, between you and iHeart, I don't know how much longer they can keep laying off people every 6 or 7 months without something's got to give.
Yeah, something does have to give, and well, you can't be in debt forever. At some point, that you got to pay the piper at some point. And I think what's going to happen is some of these big corporations are going to have to divest properties And we're already starting to see this in that there are now some more regional companies that are starting to form. And I think that's going to be a very good thing for both radio and the television industry.
I hope so
I hope so too.
because you know what I love about radio the most? It's like picking up a novel and you read a car's driving down the road. You can imagine in your mind any kind of car, whatever color it is, who's in the car with you. You don't have to, but where you see it on film, it's a red car, it's a Chevy driving down there. It's already completed for you. Radio allows your mind to explore and to expand and to move forward. And I love that. I love painting that picture. I just really absolutely positively love it very, very much. And speaking of which, I want to thank you, Randy Lane. We're almost out of time for taking the time out of your very busy day to join us here on Main Street. I really appreciate this. I got to have you back because I didn't even get to a lot of the questions about your company itself. We talked about a lot of stuff, and I know that a lot of people out there are going to be very interested in what you have to say as far as the industry and which way it goes, because people still listen to their car radios, still people listen to their radio when they're at home, and it's a very important medium that we cannot allow to be gone. We just can't. It's so important for so many reasons and so many ways to keep it going. And Randy, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on Main Street.
Thank you so very much, Gary, for having me here. And you have to do one thing for me before we leave.
Yes, sir.
One celebrity impression.
Well, as your former president, let me just say this. I feel it's very important for me to just say that I did inhale. And I throw a beach bash every December 31st at the Fontainebleau Hotel. It's called Bubba's Beach Bash, and Randy Lane, you're invited, and your entire staff is invited. No women. There's going to be plenty of women there in their little bikinis in the hot tub with the champagne flowing. And of course, Elmo is always at Bubba's Beach Bash. Yeah, always there. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's my little.
I love
that's
it.
what
Thank you.
I love to do that. You stay right where you are. As I sign off, I want to be able to talk to you just for a couple of minutes after the show.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
And I want to thank all of you out there for taking the time to join us here on Main Street. Randy Lane was my guest from the Randy Lane Company, media consultant and extraordinary gentleman to take time out of his very, very busy schedule to be with us today. And I appreciate that very much. We'll be back next week with another guest. We'll be back to entertain you as best we can. Until then, please, as my friend Jerry Springer used to say, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and